Welcome into this NBA Finals edition of the Room for Improvement podcast here on WIAT.com. I am Josh Zavadil, and I am joined by Sebastian Posey.
Hey, Josh.
I suppose we haven't done one of these in a long time.
It's been a while. It's been 2, 3, 4, 6 weeks. It's like 2 weeks.
I tried to pun your name, and you didn't catch it.
I just let it roll.
Okay.
Normally you knock me down for anything I say in the intro, so I felt just ignoring you for your attempt of an
Gonna
intro.
be the bigger man.
Yeah, that's right. That's what we're gonna do.
That's
We're gonna be the adult in the room.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I am also 14, so can't expect those things of me. And joining us tonight is a friend of the show and a friend of us, not just the show, Nick Gulas, photojournalist here at WIAT.
Yes, and I'm back. And I think I was actually on the last podcast.
You actually were. That's when we did the World Cup for Dummies of sort type of thing.
Yes, we did.
Which is still pertinent, people. So
Yep.
go listen to it. Make yourself knowledgeable for these next 3-4 weeks here.
In fact,
You'll enjoy it.
we'll go ahead and have that linked into this one. Just,
Yeah, LinkedIn.
Yeah, LinkedIn.
Yeah, we'll link it.
Instead of, related contented in LinkedIn.
Okay, LinkedIn, yeah. I don't that's probably copyrighted.
Related or LinkedIn?
LinkedIn, whatever.
As one word, linked in is not. It's
Spelled incorrectly, yes.
Okay.
Yes, it is copyrighted.
we're not talking Band-Aid and adhesive strip here.
Okay. Well, whatever. We are joining you today to talk about another sporting event that is happening currently right now. Not actually right now because they played last night, and they need some rest too, much like you do. You should probably sleep in a few hours after listening to this. We're talking about the NBA Finals.
Shooty hoops.
Shooty hoops. The San Antonio Spurs are in front of the Miami Heat by the 2-1 mark here.
It's a close one.
It's a close one in the NBA Finals. The Spurs went into Miami last night and obliterated Miami through the first half. There was one point during the second quarter where the San Antonio Spurs were shooting 91% from the field. I do not know if that has ever been done before because I don't know things like that, and I don't know those random facts. But I have a feeling that has not ever been done before.
It dumbfounded even Popovich. So if probably one of the best basketball minds in the game is completely blown away by it, then yeah, that's probably very, very, very rare.
Last night was one of those few moments where it was slow enough in the newsroom that everybody could, kind of relax and actually pay attention to it. And just as that the first quarter went on, where they only missed 2 shots, I think was it 15 of 17?
13 of 15, I believe.
Okay. And everybody's just sitting here watching this. It's just that number keeps going up and up and up. Because I remember ESPN was like 2.5 minutes left in the first quarter, threw up the graphic that this is the most points that the Heat have allowed so far in the first in a quarter of the postseason, and then the Spurs just kept scoring. And of course, Manu with the a la Patrick Sparks from a decade ago shot that hits all points of the rim and drops in to capitalize and get 41 points in the first quarter. I mean, it was absurd.
Well, I think the two things that I took away from it are, one, it's not like the Heat had a bad shooting night either. Like, I think they had, was it 60%?
They were 56 in the first half. I know that much.
Yeah.
I remember seeing the box score for the first half, but I don't know what they finished up with. But yeah, they had a decent game. They didn't play their best game, obviously, but they were, they weren't slouching.
They finished with 51.6 field goal percentage. Mm-hmm. Spurs shot 59.4% from the floor.
And what was the largest margin for a lead that the Spurs had?
I think it was like 30, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think it got up to 30. I could be wrong, but I remember it was above 24.
Yeah.
And everybody in the newsroom was commenting about how, this one's over. Heat fans are going to be leaving. And old Celtics fan Josh here said, remember 2008, the Celtics were down by like 24 points in Game 4, and they came back and won, and was insane and probably one of the greatest feelings I've ever felt, aside from Anyways,
No, that actually,
Yeah.
As a fellow Celtics fan, I actually had the same conversation with a buddy of mine who's a Heat fan who was trying to talk off a ledge, going, "I think you're going to win this," just based off. It just felt like if any team's going to do it, it was the Heat. But then again, I don't think a Greg Popovich coach team is going to be able to take their foot off the gas, and except for I think they got within 7, and then Marco
Bellinelli.
Yeah, Bellinelli just basically hit the biggest 3 of the game, put them up double digits, and they just never look back.
Well, I mean, it's the old NBA adage that everybody makes a run.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that no lead is safe because these are professional basketball players. They can do ridiculous things, and just as one team can go on that run, so can the other. But like you said, a Greg Popovich team is the least likely to lose that lead. I mean, they kind of coasted through the second half, and it got them in trouble at some points because that lead did get tight, and it became squeaky bum time a couple times, like you mentioned, that 7-point lead. And then that's where you get to the point of, that's when they responded. But yeah, I mean, of any team that was going to lose that lead, no, I felt confident saying it was over. I wasn't 100, obviously not 100%. I would have put my confidence in like 90. They weren't going to lose that game.
And even more so, though, with these two teams. Like, there are some NBA teams, when you get up that high, you're like, all right, it's over. They're not losing this. But anytime the Miami Heat are involved in a game, or anytime the Spurs are involved in a game, it's never out of reach. I have that. It's never out of reach for that team because they can do so many things. They can make so many in-game adjustments that make them that. I mean, it's why they're in the NBA Finals, quite frankly.
Well, especially in Miami too. They haven't lost a home game in this entire postseason run, and even like last night, I was like, they're going to somehow find a way because that team they own their home court. And I just kept thinking, especially when it got down to 7, I was like, they're going to find a way.
But at the same time, they did go through the Eastern Conference.
They did.
Let's put
Still,
that out
though,
there.
I'm not
Okay.
look. I'm not saying they
Okay.
went. I didn't say that they ran the gauntlets or anything. But still, that's a really, if anything, it's a psychological thing at some point that you haven't lost on your home court. We dominate here. We're down by a huge margin. They actually got in really close without LeBron on the court. Mm-hmm. So you're thinking once he comes back, he's going to be the superstar that he is and get them over the hump and get the lead.
Yeah, or when Game 2 LeBron shows up, when he went on just a ridiculous tear, and he drops 35, but it was a steady 35. It wasn't like he just had a massive quarter here or there. It was just constant throughout the game. I mean, he went on his own 8-0 run over 45 seconds in the third quarter, and just hit a couple of ridiculous shots. I mean, he hit a heat check 3 for most people, and just steps into
Pun
it like
intended?
It's nothing. No.
Okay.
Sorry. But he just steps into it and just drains it because he's LeBron. And that's your answer. How can he do that? Because he's LeBron.
Yep.
And that's exactly how if they had come back and how they kind of did fight back into it.
Because
he's LeBron.
Yep.
Well, I think though, and just to show you how good of a game the Spurs had, LeBron, best player, arguably the best player in the world in basketball.
There's not an argument.
I'm putting the word arguably just to be nice, but let's be honest, he is the best player in the world, and he was outplayed by Leonard. And I'm not saying that as an insult to James. I'm saying that as that's how good of a night all the Spurs had.
And this is Kawhi Leonard, who's coming off of 2 games that are not par for the course for his performance last year and par for the course for his performance against LeBron James, even in the regular season. This is a player who is in his 3rd year now.
He's 22.
He's 23.
He's 23?
I think he's
I thought he was
23.
23. He came out early. He
Yeah.
did come out early.
And shoots 10 of 13 from the field, 3 of 6 from distance, 6 of 7 from the free throw stripe, has 4 rebounds, 2 assists, 2 steals, 2 blocks, forces LeBron, or was part of the thing that helped force LeBron into 7 turnovers. Uncharacteristic
Very
of LeBron James. He did everything he needed to do to get back into the groove of he is 22. So confirmation, you were right at something.
Hey.
And then Danny Green. Danny Green, who has been with the Spurs organization for a while, who was a pivotal part of their chances last year when they almost won the
He
title.
was an MVP frontrunner for the first 5 games.
Yeah, and then he shoots 7 of 8 from the field last night. Only 1 of 2 from distance, but he did things that Danny Green doesn't normally do.
Exactly.
Finish in transition. He hit 2 floaters. Just it was like a godlike performance from the Spurs. And I'm not saying a godlike performance is what it takes to beat the Miami Heat, but last night's performance, let's not get it confused. Last night's performance is not going to happen every night.
No,
and it was
on
unreal.
another level.
It honestly looked like somebody was playing NBA 2K14 on easy.
With
Like,
the sliders turned all the way up.
yeah.
And they just but this is what you look at, I think, not only just in this series, but in the NBA at large, especially once you get into these later rounds, what your bench and your role players can do for you is going to make all the difference.
Yep.
You saw how, when last year when Ray Allen and Mike Miller step up for the Heat, that's when they just came, and that's when Ray Allen saved their season last year. And that's how it happened. And then you look at this year, you got the Kawhi Leonards and Bellini's and, just everybody that's not of the Spurs, quote-unquote, big three, as much as I hate that phrase and how mainstream it's become in the NBA. But outside of Duncan, Ginobili, and Parker, what those other guys do is going to make all the difference in these games. And that's what happened last night with Danny Green and Kawhi Leonard just going on tears. The Spurs are going to be hard to beat when one of them has a good game.
Yeah.
If they're both on, forget it.
And it's unreal, and it just speaks to what Popovich has been able to do in terms of utilizing these Tiago splitters, Patty Mills,
Who's 24.
Boris Diaw.
And they're young. This is the ridiculous part. We just said Kawhi's 22, that Patty Mills is 24 or 23 from Australia. And that's what's so ridiculous is that, most teams at some point when they have these old guys have to reload. Let's look at the Brooklyn Nets this year. Those guys, Pierce and Garnett, are around the same age as Duncan.
Yeah.
And Duncan is in the game, is starting, is dominating still, while you see Pierce and Garnett on the bench at the end of some games during the regular season. Postseason they're out there, but during the regular season and close games, they're not finishing the game. And so you have Tim Duncan, who is, just as people call him, the big fundamental, because he is. That's how he's still so good. So you have easily, I'd say, one of the greatest power forwards. I don't know if you can say the greatest power forward.
He's up there.
But he's
the
definitely
argument's
up there.
there.
The argument
top
is
three,
there.
top four.
Easily.
Yeah.
And then you have all this young quality talent, and that's just how these teams, progress. The Thunder are trying to do the same thing in the same mold, but they don't have that old fart that's just that can still dominate.
Yeah.
And their old fart is now coaching the Knicks.
He's like the old fart that dominates at the rec league, except for he's playing professional basketball.
Exactly. He's the guy that retired at 35, spends all his days at the YMCA shooting hoops and just dominating these 25-year-old kids who just want to dribble it through their legs and get oohs and ahs from people on the running track above. But he just does it, and he doesn't, and he's the epitome of his coach. He does it with a blank stare on his face almost the entire game. The man does not show emotion.
And you mentioned blank stare, and that's funny because now that I think about it, and Duncan does show emotion at times, but there is another guy who we just talked about, Kawhi Leonard, who does not show emotion.
No, the man is a statue.
It is unreal. His post-game interview on SportsCenter last night, I was telling Nick last night, I had to turn the volume up on everything on my computer, not just my actual computer, so that I could understand what he was saying, because he was just talking like this. Yeah, we did all the right things, and we just got to I got some help from the guys, and we got to go back out there and do the same thing in the next game.
Both teams played hard.
Yeah, basically. But that's who he is. And Adrian Wojnarowski wrote an article about him today and just talked about how some of the Spurs players have commented that he's painfully private. Like, he's just the shy kid who fell in their laps when they were able to trade George Hill and make that trade with Indiana on draft night to be able to get him. And then he worked his hind end off during the lockout to change his shot, because that was the big question, was he going to have a jump shot? And he's been able to show that he has. And I think for somebody this young to have two great performances now we'll see how he does the rest of the series. But 2 great NBA Finals series this early in his career. It just speaks to the promise he has going forward.
Absolutely. And Magic Johnson tweeted out that he's going to be a star in the NBA, and people were mocking him, and rightfully so, because Magic Johnson talks out the side of his mouth more times than he doesn't. But I mean, he does have the chance. I mean, it's hard to argue with what you've seen already before you. You're going to these last 2 years in the finals, what he has been able to do, when he steps up, he is exactly what you look for in a budding superstar.
Mm-hmm.
They don't start out. There are very few players that can step into this league and are automatically going to have to take that superstar role or be in that superstar role. I mean, you look at John Wall had to because of his situation.
Washington.
Yeah, and Kyrie Irving because Cleveland. I mean, there are guys that have to take that role because of their team's position. Kawhi doesn't have to do that, but he's not just a role player. He's beyond that. Just a guy that's going to give you his solid 12 and 8 every night. This guy he's making a difference in all points of the game.
And Adrian made that point. He said, Kawhi Leonard is the reason the Spurs have been so good these past 3 years. He is giving Tim Duncan, Tony Parker, Manu Ginobili, and Greg Popovich another chance at a championship.
Well, one thing that Popovich did all year, he wasn't playing his guys more than 30, 34 minutes a game. Like, for this reason, when he got to the finals, they're going to be well rested. You can do that when you have a guy like Leonard on your team. And yeah, he doesn't have to be a Wall. He doesn't have to be that yet. But guys like Duncan and Parker and Ginobili are not going to be there for much longer. They're just not. And I think if they win this year, you might see Duncan go. They're going to start retiring over the next 2-3 years. And all of a sudden you have someone who can be the quote-unquote heir apparent of that team, and he's showing you that. And I think after the first 2 games you start getting some criticism for him, and he steps up and he delivers. And that's one thing too, that to be a true superstar in this league, you have to be able to answer that. When people start saying, "Hey, what's wrong? Why aren't you doing anything?" He stepped up.
He answered. And I think your point about Greg Popovich and Tim Duncan potentially retire, I think that's a very, 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 very real possibility. Should they close this series out and take home a championship, because they've been trying these past 3 years and they've gotten pretty close these past 3 years. These guys are on the end of their careers, and they know that. And I think for Pop to be able to go out on top and for Duncan to be able to go out on top, I don't think they would really have other than will to play the game, I don't think they would have a definite reason why they would have to say, you know what, we're going to run it back. As for, like the Celtics did, they kept trying to run it back and run it back. At this stage in the game in his career, they win it. I wouldn't be surprised to see them take off.
There's something different about Duncan this series, and I think it starts with even his comments before the series started. Yep. And there was a huge deal made about him saying we need 4 more wins or we're going to get it. That's not trash talking. That's confidence. And Duncan, who is someone who's always been incredibly quiet and incredibly reserved, he's showing a different side, and to me, it's because he knows he wants to win this series and he can ride out in the sunset.
And because last year hurt.
Oh yeah, he's still. The whole blow up in the media because we needed something to talk about for 6 days between the end of the conference finals and the actual finals about how we wanted the Heat. Well, no joke. I mean, why should anybody be surprised at that? Especially the way that last year ended. They had it. It was in their hands. It slipped. I mean, it was literally they had it. They had their hands cupped, and it just fell through their fingers like water. It was theirs. It was there, and they might as well have had their hands on the trophy. And then
Jesus Shuttleworth.
Yeah, and then the overtime game that Game 6 last year is one of the greatest games in the finals.
They had the courts roped off for the trophy presentation.
Yeah, it was done. And so, I mean, that was just a load of crap for them to have to go through and try and build something out of that. But, we needed something to talk about. But he's not going to smack talk anybody. That's not his style. Even on the court, he's not going to, because these guys are so good at what they do that they don't need to talk. They're just going to dribble around you, pass it 4 times. Everybody's going to touch the ball over 6 seconds, and they're going to get a layup on the backside while you're still spinning your head trying to figure out what just happened around you.
Well, that's what happened with the Bargnani 3. Like, that came off that came off just solid ball movement. You're having people pass around the perimeter and they find the open man. Like, that's just quality ball movement. That's not somebody overtaking a game. That's just good team play.
And that's what Popovich's system is predicated on, and that's why they've been able to stay good for so long, because they're using their strengths, every single one of their strengths, within the system.
It doesn't. I mean, that's like you said. That's Spurs basketball. They just play fundamental basketball, and it's a contrast of styles, because you've got the Heat playing this new fullback basketball style that is kind of taken over the NBA with guys that have size. They'll just drop that shoulder, take 3 steps, and go to the basket and try and get that layup, and then they'll complain when they don't get fouled. Well, I mean, they're the size of a dump truck. Of course, a foul on you is not going to be the same thing as a foul on, Muggsy Bogues or Reggie Miller when those guys were playing. I mean, they were a little bit smaller than LeBron James, just slightly. And so I think that's one of the adjustments that Eric Spoelstra's had to make in this series, is trying to figure out, just like last year, how do you play your brand of basketball with more fundamentals to be able to counter what the Spurs have, because the Spurs aren't going to change. They're like Alabama football. You know what you're going to get. They're going to do it anyways. Even if you stop them, they're going to keep doing it because it works. It's a tried and true method, and over time, it's going to take its toll on you. And that's what happens here, is that on defense, you're eventually going to fall asleep. On defense, you're eventually going to lose your man on a pick. You're not going to be able to fight through a screen. A quick ball movement's going to have the switch messed up. There's so many things that just good fundamental basketball can do to a basketball team of the Heat's stature, because they're no slouch. I mean, obviously not. But they can be made to look dumb in a series like this, especially in a game like last night.
See first half. And another comment before we move on a little bit. Greg Oden got to play in an NBA Finals game, and that's awesome. That's awesome. Standing, sitting, clapping, oh, for you, Greg Oden. I know you're listening.
We talk about the Spurs role players and how they're stepping up. And the one thing I will say about the Heat, and if they lose, and I'm going to hate this if it happens, but they're going to end up. There's going to be a lot of talk of it being on LeBron because he's LeBron, and that's not fair. And I'm not even a LeBron liker. Like, I'm not going to say I'm a hater because I don't really understand.
Twitter says you have to hate him or like him, so make a choice.
There's got to be some gray area.
No, there's not.
Fine, for this, I'll say I hate him.
Okay,
but it's gonna fall on him. But the problem is, when you have like guys around him, Chalmers. What happened to Chalmers? Did he forget how to play basketball?
Has he known how?
And he's not. I saw somebody put it out on Twitter last night. At some point, he can't live off a 3 in an NCAA title game. And at some point the shine comes off that apple, and this series, to this point, is starting to do that to him.
He has been a serviceable point guard for them up until even still. Last night, chalk it up to having a bad night. He was awful last night.
Yeah.
0 for 5, something like that, 2 points. Chalk that up. But he has been serviceable in the past. But he cannot have nights like last night, and the rest of the starting lineup, aside from Dwayne Wade and LeBron, cannot have nights like last night again if they're going to want to pull this thing out, because they've got one more game in Miami, and then they go back to San Antonio, and they start that 1-1-1 format. Mm-hmm. And Mario Chalmers is going to have to play the role that he's played for them when they've played well this season. And, it's do or die. I'm sure he realizes that.
And that's my point. You're not needing him to step up. You're just needing him to not mess up. Yeah. And, okay, you talked about Wade having a good game. Bosh was 4 for 4 last night. He only had 12 touches. Guys like him and he had a good game 1 and a game 2. That needs to continue. If you want to do the quote-unquote big 3 and your role players aren't stepping up, spread the ball to these guys.
Well, Bosh has to touch the ball.
Yeah. He did not get enough last night.
No. And I think that was partly because at some point, Wade and LeBron, that trigger goes off of hero ball. And when you're down 30 points, 25 points.
Running your offense is not at the forefront of your mind.
No, you're trying to get back. in your mind, there are such things as 7-point shots, and you start trying to make 7-point shots. And that's where, you get away from post play, even though, which is so weird about that, because when people start trying to make up points, the 3-point line has changed the game in that sense over the last 30 years here, that, this is how I make up points. No, you don't. Get that 3-footer on your post player who can, 3 out of 5 times can get the best of Tim Duncan, because they're both good at what they do. He's going to get the best of them sometimes because of age, and 2 because of skill.
Well, and LeBron did that last night. I think he caused how many? He stole the ball from Duncan at least 5, 6 times.
Something like
it seemed
that.
like maybe even 7.
But
5
LeBron
steals.
doesn't need to be the one down there. Bosch needs to be the one down there. They need to be feeding it to him. They don't need to be jacking up outside shots, looking for those massive point baskets that aren't a part of this game.
Yeah.
And that's how they won game 2. Besides LeBron just being LeBron, he can't do bad all by himself. He can.
Shouts to Tyler Perry.
He's gonna have his game where he just goes off. And game 3, even on the LeBron scale in the playoffs, game 2. Game 2 was not even in the top 10 of LeBron performances in the playoffs. There are 4 games in Cleveland easily that top what he did in game 2. And so it wasn't just him. He had a good night. He's LeBron, all hail King James when he has a good game and his team wins. But like we mentioned, Bosch had a solid first 2 games and then went away from it. And I think when you look at tomorrow night, he's probably the key to them winning tomorrow night, aside from, the Spurs shooting 91%.
Well, and that's he was 4 for 4. He had a big 3 in the 4th. You have to find ways to rotate him in. And I think when you have a guy like LeBron, who, if you want LeBron to be LeBron, what helps LeBron be LeBron? If the other team, besides that, if the other team has to respect the other 4 players on the court. If they're all having bad nights, hey, fine.
Right.
We'll let LeBron. We'll just go guard LeBron and make guys like Chalmers and guys like Birdman beat us. Mm-hmm. But if the rest of your team is stepping up and they have to respect that, that gives LeBron better opportunities.
And another thing is that when you get into getting the Heat out of their game, they're a big transition team. They're a team that thrives on the turnovers and the fast breaks and the outlet passes.
Flying death machine.
Yes. You need the flying death machine to appear 3 to 4 times a game for the Heat to really be successful, to be in their element.
I can't really think of, especially last night, but I can't think of any iconic flying death machine moments in this series quite yet.
No, and which speaks to the Spurs' abilities to force LeBron to, have a more all-around game than, the tackle basketball style, which they can go to. And if the Spurs keep that up, I don't think it goes 7. It may go 5. And tomorrow night, I think tomorrow night's your series to this point. There's no such thing as a must-win game because, you have to lose that 4th one no matter what, and you have other chances to win. When you're up against the wall, it's a must-win game. But I'd say things are bleak if the Heat don't pull out tomorrow night's game.
And Matt Moore made the point. He says, this is just like last season. This happened. The Spurs had a desperation game. The Heat are about to have a desperation game. I get his point, but I also think that these teams are a little bit different. The dynamics of this series is a little bit different than it was last year. You don't have the Spurs with that motivation in the back of their mind thinking, we've got to get this one.
Right.
But even with that, the Heat, every single time they lose, since I believe the last time they lost back-to-back games in the finals was when they lost to Dallas. Mm-hmm. Every single time since then, when they lose a game, they come back the next game and just almost dominate. So if the Spurs can go into game 4 and maybe not necessarily win, because I don't see the Heat losing 2 back-to-back on their court. I just don't. But if they can keep them in check and not allow the Heat to do what they do in these situations, even then, I still think the Spurs have this.
Mm-hmm. And I think you need a Dwayne Wade. I think you need 2012 Dwayne Wade tomorrow night. You don't need the guy that's been playing these past 2 years who had to rest in the regular season just so he could even make it to this point, and the assumption that the team would make it this far. You need that guy that dominates the game. He has to suck it up and play all out for his 35, 40 minutes. He probably has to go 40 minutes tomorrow night.
And to his credit, he has been pretty good this series. He was 9 of 14 last night, and he was good in game 1, I believe.
Yeah.
I don't remember what he did in game 2.
But he needs to be LeBron level. Him and LeBron, in order for the Heat to take this series back, need to be the two best players on the court. Period.
I can agree. And as we wrap this up, I wanted to rant about this earlier, so I'm going to make this go a little bit longer than we thought it was going to go so I can rant about it.
Well, hold on. We need to at some point we need to brand this of Zavadil's rants.
Yes.
So just in the back of your minds, let's think of a name.
Zavadil's rant this week is shut up about Chris Bosh. Shut up about him.
Bush.
He is an amazing player who has completely recrafted who he is as a player and sacrificed who he was as a player, which, by the way, was a 24-10 player for the Toronto Raptors and was still getting criticized because he has weird mannerisms and actually looks like a Raptor. Shut up. Who cares?
I'm sorry,
he also makes really awesome all-star videos.
But have we seen the Jurassic Park meme?
I have seen it.
It's hysterical.
Things
okay?
are funny.
It plays into it.
Things are funny, but people have taken mainly the dinosaur thing is like, okay, fine. People look like things, I guess, whatever.
I think he looks like an avatar,
But these comments that people have made in the past, like this Bosch Spice and Christina Bosch because he doesn't do something right. Like, really? Really? Like, you're just going to cast that on him because and he has acknowledged that it got to him. And an ESPN.com profile, shouts to ESPN.com, Tom Haberstroh did a phenomenal job of profiling Chris Bosh, and he said after the finals loss against the Mavericks, it crushed him, and he reads these. He at the time was reading the articles. He was reading all the Twitter comments, and he sees all these things, and he was like, all these comments about my sexuality and my orientation because I didn't make a rebound or I didn't do this, and he's like, it gets to you, and it's just it frustrates me that that's where we're at as a society. That when somebody doesn't perform to the way you think they should perform because of who they are, you start making comments about their sexuality.
It's really unfair, and I'm sorry, I'll be quick. It's really unfair, I think, to him, especially after the loss to the Mavericks. I remember reading how he was going into the 2012 season. He was the first guy in the gym, last guy out. Like, he was the one who didn't go out. All he was doing was preparing. And you didn't ever hear about it because he was the most quiet of the big three. He basically did. He gave up his superstar status to be on this team, and he worked his butt off when he got there, and for some reason he's just a joke. Now, I'm gonna like I do laugh at some of them, like not mainly the dinosaur ones, but
the confetti last year was also hysterical too.
And
but
what
here's the thing: it's that one, he brings it on himself. And let me finish here before you jump on me for
Josh
this.
rant overload.
But he brings it on himself, and that's just because of who he is. And it's like you mentioned, it's society's response to him not fitting into it's. He's the square hole,
yeah.
And you've got the cylinder that's trying to fit into it,
right.
From society. It doesn't work, and so he brings it on himself in that sense. But at the same time, it's not his fault because he's got cameras all around him. Every single moment on the court, off the court is basically documented. I mean, the guy broke down crying after losing to the Mavericks. The guy just lost an NBA Finals he finally made it to the finals.
After being a member of the Raptors.
Yeah.
And never doing anything of note.
Again, literally he had to make a video to make people realize he should be voted an All-Star. He had the stats, but no one knew about him.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, and I get that. And he does bring it on himself. And he mentioned in the profile that it came to a point where he decided, you know what? If people can't accept me for who I am and the way I act and what I do, who cares? They're not going to. I'm not going to change them. So I'm just going to be me, and I'm not going to worry about it. I'm not going to care. He stopped reading the comments, his Twitter comments. He stopped reading articles unless his wife or his mother, I believe, sends it to him. And he is just himself. guy who went to Georgia Tech, likes to write HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and drink some adult beverages from Abita Brewery in his free time. And that's who he is, and he's not going to apologize for it. And so, to end this, bring it full circle, shut up about Chris Bosh. Just shut up about it. But please don't shut up about this Room for Improvement podcast. Tell your friends. Tell your animals. Tell your imaginary friends. Tell your moms. Tell your dads. Tell your grandparents.
Your aunties, your uncles.
Yep. Tell all of them
That
that
strange person you pass on the street
Yeah, just
corner
walk
every
up to
third
strangers.
Tuesday.
Yeah, tell them about this. They can find it on WIAT.com. We have more of them. We try to do this on a semi-regular manner.
Well, again, there is room for improvement on how
Yep.
we do this. Oh!
Nailed it. Nick, where can...
quite-
Okay.
Is that why you named it Room for Improvement?
Yeah, so that we didn't have to do it consistently.
Well, that and basically, you see, it's a good way for us to have a name that's not, self-serving.
It's a
If
cop-out.
Yeah, if people say like, "Man, this podcast is bad," it's like, well, it's named Room for Improvement. Clearly, we know there's things we could fix.
Oh, boy. Nick,
Oh.
where can people follow you on the internet.com?
People can find me on Al Gore's Creation on the Twitter machine at Nick_Goulis. There's no K there. They can also follow me along on my podcast for the station, which I'm going to try and, get some regularity with it here because the World Cup starts tomorrow. So dive in for penalties, listen to our previous episodes, and we'll have more episodes coming up for you throughout the World Cup at yellow, the number 4 dive on the twitter.com. And that's about the only places that people need to find me on the interwebs.
You can find Sebastian Posey where?
You could find me on Twitter.
In the gym 24/7 working out, getting fit.
More like
Up in the gym working on my fitness. He's
more
my
like
witness.
2.5 hours max a week.
Okay.
And
ooh.
that's pushing it.
Ugh.
You can find me on Twitter at Sebastian Posey. That's SEBASTIANPOSEY.
And you can find myself anywhere your mind takes you.
At thanks.
At thanks. You can also find me on twitter.com. That is TWITTER period COM. That's twitter.com. And my username is at Joshua Zavadil. That's JOSHUA ZAVADIL. Yes, it's ZAVADIL.
Yeah. I think your mother would be proud that you're using your given name.
Yes, it sounds like daffodil, but you pronounce it like Zavadil. And that's it for this episode. We will be back the next time we decide to do this, which is probably going to be in a couple weeks. We hope you enjoyed this. Goodbye.